You know, you can't help but look at this story, like this weekend's violence at UC Santa Barbara or the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, without asking what signs were possibly missed. What more could have been done to help troubled kids? Dr. Harold Koplowitz is a child psychiatrist. Jessica Leahy is a former middle school teacher and writer of the New York Times column, The Parent-Teacher Conference. And Thomas Ruskin is a former detective with the New York City Police Department. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Harold, let me start with you. The parents in this case in California, they got their child help. He was seeing a therapist. They stayed in contact with the therapist. They monitored their child over a long period of time. And when they became truly concerned, they called the police. And still this happened. What other powers did they have, considering this was a 22-year-old?
I think we have to step back for a second and remember, these kind of events, horrific as they are still rare. What isn't rare is the fact that there are 15 million kids who have these disorders, and they're at higher risk for academic failure, for substance abuse, for alcohol abuse, for being a bully, and for suicide.
Well, if the parents said, we know there's a problem here, and we're trying to address that problem, what else could they have done?
Well, without knowing this case enough, we know that parents who have these kinds of kids, they have to have even more supervision. So if your kid is not doing what you want them to do because you worry that they're socially isolated, that they seem to be more depressed, that they are peculiar in the respect that they're not engaging with the rest of the world, these parents have the ability to cut kids off financially, to contact, by the way, the police, and make sure that the police in this case didn't investigate tightly enough or enough to stop the risk.
Before I get to the police side, I just want to ask you, social disconnection, sadness, loneliness, is there some sign that lets a parent know it could turn violent?
Right. Well, first of all, this kid had a chronic illness, and it was complex. But for the parent who's watching and is concerned, you know your kid. If there's a change in appetite, a change in sleep, a change in the way they socialize, in academic activities, in extracurricular activities, don't hesitate. That's when you say, I know my kid, something is new, something is wrong. In the same way that if they had a flu or a virus, you would go to a doctor. That's what you should do.
Thomas, let me turn to you. So the police show up 2 weeks before the shooting, called by the parents who are concerned. They interview this young man, say he was calm and shy, didn't suspect anything else. We know from his writings now there were weapons hidden in his room.
Right.
Did the police have more powers that they didn't use?
Police could have done a little bit better of an investigation. And what we're learning from each of these incidents is what police and law enforcement and security officials have to do in the future. So what we're learning from this incident is maybe the detectives, there should have been a special squad that follows up on these type of things. Looked at his YouTube postings already before his dialogue on the night of the shooting.
Because the average cop on the beat is not trained to detect mental illness any more than they're trained to detect heart or chest pains.
That's
correct. And to the doctor's point, we have to start using law enforcement and medical officials and school officials together in a team to try and diagnose these things ahead of time and prevent them.
You get me to schools, okay? And how about this? I'm a father, and my child comes home to me and they say, Dad, there's a child at school that's worrying me. He's not a bully. As a matter of fact, he's withdrawn, he's sad, he's lonely, he's being bullied, but me and my friends are afraid that he may do something bad. As a parent, what are my powers?
As a parent, I think your first power is to be really honest with your kid and be clear that while we hear about it all the time in the news, violence is on the decline and has been on the decline since 1993. That said, while it's exceedingly rare for these kind of things to happen, you need to explain to your kid that your teacher can be an incredible resource. Your teacher spends a lot of time with kids in the class.
When do I call that teacher? And what are my rights as another parent to call the teacher or the principal to say, my children are concerned about one of your students?
Absolutely. Teachers do want to know that kind of information because it helps us teach kids more effectively, and it helps us intervene when we're obligated and when we feel it's time to do so.
If we're going to be honest about this, it's time for parents not to be ashamed. So if a kid was coughing all the time or a kid was bleeding in the class, you would call the teacher. I think that hesitating is the worst thing. If you have concerns,
but there's
speak to the
political
teacher.
correctness, Harold, and you know what everybody's afraid of? If I call a teacher and I say, there's an odd kid in your class, and God forbid we use the words like, that seems to me like a kid who could snap, we're chastised
Well,
and we're
let me
ridiculed.
flip this around on you, though. Teachers spend an incredible amount of time with kids, and when teachers go to parents and say, I'm concerned about something, it's time for you to listen, because teachers often spend more time with your children than you do.
Most schools now have either security or law enforcement officials assigned to those schools who work with the schools and work with the districts in identifying these type of problems as well as other problems, and are available to parents of other students. Those parents should go to those law enforcement or security officials or the officials from the schools.
In the 10 seconds left, is it necessary sometimes to throw political correctness aside
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
alert authorities
Yes.
if you think a child is odd?
It's time to start treating these diseases like they were physical illnesses. That's the important part.
Guys, thank you to
Absolutely.
all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank
We're
you.
back
Thanks
with
so
much
much.
more of today, including a special announcement from Amy Poehler.